Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for Ready to Hire Simpler and Smarter. I'm Cindy Davidson, Director of Business Solutions here at Corexcel, and I'm here with Andrea Vi. Andrea manages our webinar series. If you have any questions or challenges along the way, please send a private chat to Andrea or choose the panelist option so she can respond to you. If you send the chat to me as a host, I may not see it. We do record the webinar so we can send you a link later, but your individual participation in any of the polls I ask you to join in on won't be included, so please don't hesitate to participate. We're going to cover today very quickly, because I think you already know this, the importance of successful hires, but then get into how this tool, PXT Select, can help you get a clear picture of a candidate's verbal skill, verbal reasoning, numerical ability, numerical reasoning, behavioral traits, and interests. I'm aware that many of the hiring assessments available might measure one or two of those areas. So it is going to include how you can match candidates to over 130 job functions that have been identified, how you can compare multiple candidates to each other, getting really good interview questions tailored for your candidates, and then we'll quickly review, what reports are available and the training available for your team so you could get started right away. The importance of successful hires. Michael Eisner said it best. I really like this. My inventory goes home every night. How about it? So just some of the quick numbers again behind hiring, which you're probably very familiar with. According to a 2016 Harris poll of over 2,300 hiring managers, it was done on behalf of CareerBuilder. 27% say cost per hire are over $50,000. 41% say over $25,000, with the average cost being $17,000. So in some of the challenges that we don't effectively address all the time, most of you are good at writing and providing job descriptions. I see most companies have gotten to that point, not all. But then it is taking the next step of identifying what are the traits necessary to fill that job. And then the next step, once you have the traits, what questions are you going to ask to determine if someone has those traits? It's particularly challenging, I have found in my past, if you have more than one stakeholder. It's difficult to maintain some type of consistency. It's very easy to be inconsistent in interviewing, and overall just always feels like a very inefficient and time-consuming process. And then it gets down to when we talk about, candidate A versus candidate B. How do you do that easily to make sure that it is as objective as possible? Again, what I hear from my human resource colleagues is, gee, whenever there's a hiring situation, it seems like a big interruption. Gosh, we were going along just fine, and now we've got openings. So according to the U.S. Department of Labor's document called Testing and Assessment, an Employer's Guide to Good Practices, you should really consider testing if you've got selection or placement procedures that are resulting in poor hiring decisions. You see that as a trend. Your employee productivity is low. Employee errors have serious consequences, either financial or health or safety. You do see a high employee turnover or absenteeism, or you're doing assessments currently, but they don't meet current legal and professional standards. So some good reasons to consider. And again, I'm going to be referring a lot in this presentation by the U.S. Department of Labor's document that I referenced. I find it to be extremely helpful in setting standards. What they say is you really want to look for tests that measure what it claims to measure. For example, a test of mental ability does in fact measure mental ability and not some other characteristic. That may seem to be like, of course you would do that, but that's not always the case. The test should be job relevant. In other words, it measures one or more characteristics that are important to the job. And certainly by using the test, that you can be more effective in making employment decisions. So for example, again, we're going to talk a lot about numeric ability. It should really help you select qualified workers for a job that requires that type of ability, numeric ability. And then, of course, the degree to which a test is reliable and valid, that it measures what it claims to measure consistently and reliably. For example, one indication of reliability is if a person were to take the test again, the person gets a similar score. That's actually called retest reliability. And again, some principles. What you want to do is make sure you're using assessment tools in a purposeful manner. It's clear to have an understanding of what needs to be measured and why are you measuring it. You don't want to rely too much on any one test to make decisions. Using the whole purpose approach is recommended. Assessments should not contribute more than 1/3 to the decision. And again, in relying on a test, we're going to talk a lot about using the testing during the hiring process, particularly for interviewing. You want to use assessments appropriate for the target population, and repeating again, using reliable assessment instruments and procedures. In other words, those that provide dependable and consistent information, and that you can find that documentation, those that have demonstrated to be valid for the specific purpose for which they are being used. And of course, instruments that are unbiased and fair to all groups. And just a quick note on that, the general purpose of employment laws and regulations is to prohibit unfair discrimination in employment and provide equal employment opportunity for all. So unfair discrimination occurs when employment decisions are based on race, sex, religion, ethnicity, age, or disability, rather than job-relevant knowledge, skills, and abilities and other characteristics. So again, you are to use, according to the U.S. Department of Labor's guide, only those instruments that are unbiased and fair to all groups. And the PXT Select assessment we're introducing to you today adheres to the principles we just reviewed. So what it does is it evaluates a person's cognitive abilities, behavioral traits, and interests. And they reflect the 3 areas of what's called the person-environment fit model. And the decision to focus on these 3 areas is based on findings in the field of occupational research, actually dating back to 1909. A gentleman by the name of Frank Parsons developed what's called the Parsons tripartite model for vocational direction. And it proposed these 3 areas in addition to knowledge of the job market and an objective view of the relationship between one's own traits and available jobs. And his initial framework evolved over the years, took us to 1939. If you've ever heard of the trait and factor theory of occupational choice, it just gave the job match process increased precision by applying statistical measurement to determine actually the degree of relationship between an individual's traits and the factors required for success in overall work environments. And then again, over the years, further work in the late 1990s further refined the process, and it led to what's called the person-environment fit model, which suggested that people are drawn to environments that allow them to express their traits behaviorally, and that this fit results in desirable outcomes that are significant and that can be adapted over time. Organizational psychologists, career coaches, some of you that are on the line today are in these areas that agree that individuals do perform best when they hold positions best suited to their traits. Sounds like common sense, but somehow we just don't always get there. So taken together, the models were to provide a comprehensive conceptual framework for understanding how you're going to match someone's personality and ability to job requirements. So how do you measure it? How do you determine it? Well, the PXT Select is one way. The assessment we're going to talk about currently involves a library of over 135 performance models that apply to specific jobs and organizations. And the goal is to help match people with positions in which they'll enjoy what they do and they'll perform well. So what does it measure? We talked a little bit about some of these in the very beginning. Cognitive abilities, verbal skill, which is a measure of vocabulary, and what respondents do is identify synonyms to words. Different than verbal reasoning, which is going to measure the ability to use words in reasoning and problem solving. And it does that by asking respondents to complete analogies. On the numerical scale, it measures two things: one's ability to complete calculations, and the reasoning, which measures how well an individual can use numbers to solve problems. And finally, in the behavioral traits section, participants are asked to agree or disagree with statements of work-related preferences in 9 distinct areas. Those areas, which you'll see in later slides, are pace, assertiveness, sociability, conformity, outlook, decisiveness, accommodation, independence, and judgment. I said that final, I'm sorry. The third one is the interest, which is asking participants to rate their level of enjoyment of various activities, and it measures their degree of interest in 6 areas. Again, you'll see these in later slides: enterprising, financial, administrative, creative, mechanical, people service, and technical. And it's done a little bit differently than the previous 2 areas. It's done in what's called a paired comparison format. So the respondents are asked whether they would somewhat prefer one activity over another or highly prefer one activity over another. And just another note on the interest section, a little bit of history on where this model came from. It's based on John Holland's 1959 RISEC classification or model. It took hundreds of attributes and simplified personality types to 6. And those 6 earlier ones are located on the outside of this hexagon. You'll see them from, that's why it's called the RISEC, the realistic, investigative, artistic, social, enterprising, and conventional. And they were converted to the 6 types of environments which are on the inside of the hexagon, and those are the ones that are measured by the PXT Select assessment. And you can kind of see when you look at the geometric shape, the areas of congruence and the areas that are opposite of each other. So for example, that enterprising individual who maybe is a sales manager, they'll grow and succeed in an environment that's much different than that environment in which an investigative person is going to thrive in. The opportunities and rewards just aren't going to fit each of them the same way. So further, in terms of the candidate experience, each receives an assessment that is unique to them, and it's based on their answers by use of what's called an adaptive testing format. That's used for both the cognitive and behavioral sections of the assessment. So in the cognitive section, for example, increasingly more difficult questions are given to a candidate in response to correct answers, and easier questions are given following incorrect answers. On the behavioral side, it's presented in a similar format, but different, increasingly stronger worded statements given following each endorsed item. So the questions are presented on a scale in 1 difficulty or behavioral expression. And the adaptive testing maximizes the precision in the measurement of response, in the measurement of their true score of their measures, while it does minimize the number of questions asked. So it's really going to hit that. It's really going to hit the bar. Where is this individual really? So before we get into the solution, the details of the assessment program, I'd like to understand just a little bit, if you wouldn't mind, just chatting. And again, we won't, looks like Andrea opened a poll here. We'd just like to understand your experience with hiring assessments. If you've got past experience, if you've not had any experience, you currently use an assessment, or you're looking to use an assessment. Kind of a little bit of everything here. So thanks very much. We can close the poll now. I appreciate that. So we'll take a look at the start of the process, which is choosing a performance model. And the performance model that you choose would relate to the job description, obviously, and the traits necessary to carry out that job will be illustrated then on the performance model. So every performance model looks the same, but the ratings are different. In other words, you'll see every performance model has the same thinking style categories, behavioral traits, and top interests. But what's going to change is, of course, the top interests on the bottom, and the colored bars in each of those areas are going to be in different locations. So in this sample, the ideal candidate you can see on the composite score is going to be somewhere between a 4.5 and an 8.5. On the numerical ability, if you go 4 down, you'll see that they are really looking for someone between, it looks, a 6.5 to a 10. They really want somebody with strong numerical ability. On the behavioral traits, looking for someone who is a little on the unassuming side rather than forceful behavior trait. So the performance ratings are created in 2 ways for each job. One was actually encompassing actual performance metrics of various organizations over many years to create a number of these models. The second way was other models were created by leveraging the U.S. Department of Labor's data, and that's available through their data collection program on their ONET website. You can kind of look up what's going on there. The result for PXT Select is a library of over 135 job performance models, and you can see all of the items, again, that we previously reviewed listed here. Some of the specific ones: architecture and engineering, building and grounds, cleaning and maintenance, business and financial operations, customer service, sales, production management, healthcare, just a whole host. Once a candidate completes the online assessment, which takes about 60 to 90 minutes, their responses then are placed on the performance model scales, and we'll see what that looks like next. So we're going to follow a sample candidate through this presentation. His name's Oliver Chase, and you'll see that this is page 2 of the comprehensive selection report. It gives you the overview. Where is Oliver Chase against our performance model for this position? And you can see in some areas he is clearly in the band. In some areas he is outside of the band, and actually has, for example, in the verbal skill, the second one down in thinking style, he actually has a stronger verbal skill than this position calls for. And in some areas he is, right in the center, the verbal reasoning, which is below that. He's right in the center. And then in the performance model, you're going to see not just where the candidate stands in the range, you'll see that the composite score here for this performance model is in this area. They're looking for that 4.5 to 8.5, looking for someone in that range. And it also gives you the explanation. So here it'll tell you, so what does that 4.5 to 8.5 mean? Well, it means that this person assimilates information with minimal confusion and can handle more complex information processing. So again, and you can see in this sample for Oliver Chase, once he takes the profile and the comprehensive selection report is developed, you can see where he stands here, that he fits the performance model, and it's going to tell you that. In looking at further detail, it's also going to talk to you about, so again, we're following through here, describing, again, where this ideal candidate, what they should look like. They should perform intricate calculations easily, comfortable communicating complex data to others. It looks like he can do it. On the numeric reasoning, he actually, he is outside of the band. He actually analyzes data at a more advanced level than the position requires. So it's going to give you that explanation, suggesting that he may have unused talents in this area. On the behavioral traits, our ideal candidate we're looking for is very active and results-driven. You can see the colored bar on that urgent-driven, fast-paced side. On assertiveness, we're looking, though, for someone who's a little more unassuming, a little need to have influence over others, and instead is content to follow directions in a friendly environment. Again, unassuming, more diplomatic, with little need to control, rather than a forceful, competitive, achievement-oriented individual. So you can see, again, just kind of a blowout of the bar here. And again, the explanation coming with the rating. And so here's the rating. Oliver fits the performance model on PACE. You can see that on assertiveness, he may wish to assert a stronger presence than is typical for success in this position. So you can see it on the bar, and you see the explanation. And it follows through for all of them. You'll see where he fits the model, where he may be either below the model in this decisiveness. He may have more difficulty taking decisive action under pressure than is typical for those who are successful in the position. And again, it follows through and shows you where he fits the model, where he is outside, and the explanation. Here on the interest, the ideal candidate here is enterprising, people service-oriented, and also focused in the financial administrative area. So it'll give you, again, an overall description that ties those three together, and it'll explain you're looking for an individual motivated to attend to detailed aspects of a position while focusing on profit issues, balancing administration with competition. The individual appreciates leading, but also cooperating. And then again, you can see Oliver Chase's scores here. He is got technical, creative, and then financial enterprising is where he is tied. So he's got that. He's got the enterprising piece, and the financial piece just in different orders. You can see his enterprising piece is tied for third down there. Interests make up only 20% of the candidate's overall job fit score in the PXT Select assessment. Interests are often satisfied outside of work. It doesn't mean they're important, but your thinking and behavior styles each make up the other 40%. Still, a person's interests can provide insight into How motivated will they be? How much enjoyment will they get? So what does it all mean? You have all this information, you have some insight into a candidate that perhaps you can't get just through an interview or by asking others about the individual's performance. And you're not necessarily going to exclude candidates based on their assessment, since again, it should be a third of your decision, but it will give you a roadmap of areas to explore and specific interview questions to ask so you can be a little bit more efficient and consistent in your process. So just kind of think about, where you see your main challenges with interviewing. I can tell you in my past, it's been about those, developing effective questions, consistency across stakeholders, length of interview, the whole process. If there's anything you want to share through chat, you can go ahead and do that. So here we'll go for it, and I'll share some things with you on this section. It reviews those areas in this page where Oliver fell outside the performance model. So for example, on assertiveness, remember, he is more forceful than the performance model. He's comfortable sticking up for his opinions and needs. So it is suggesting that you ask Oliver, hey Oliver, when you're working with a team, how do you get buy-in from your colleagues if you think you have a good idea? How about a recent situation where you felt it was best to defer to others or not take action? What was the result? And you really want to listen for, is he willing and able to soften his level of assertiveness? Does he have that self-awareness to defer to others when the situation calls for it? Again, you can see saying he's more deliberate than the performance model. In the verbal skill, he's above the performance model. So in both of those areas, again, you'll get the suggestions as to what you want to ask and what you want to look for. And then it also gives real estate on, so what are the areas of strength here? Where is he closest to the middle in this scale? The first one, again, if you remember back, was verbal reasoning. He's able to analyze more complex verbal information. So just to confirm, you want to have him describe a situation in which he received instructions that seemed to be incomplete. What did he do to fix the situation? What did he do to make sure he was completing it correctly? How about asking him to tell you about a time when he discovered there had been a miscommunication? How did he figure out there was a problem? How did he handle it? How really does he assess and apply information for different settings, for different tasks? How about different styles of individuals? So again, it'll give you these recommendations for each area, even though he fits the model. And then it goes through every other area and will give you interview questions and what to listen for. So just an example, on PACE, even though it wasn't one of those highlighted, it gives you what you need if you want to explore this particular area. And that really depends on your culture, your unique challenges, what you decide is most important here. Now let's take a look at how it helps you compare candidates. And again, this particular report, it's a separate report, part of the 9-report suite that's included in the assessment fee for each candidate. And you can see here that overall, one candidate fits the model better than Oliver, and that is Andrew Langley. He has a 77% fit over Oliver Chase's 70%. And what this report will do is give you, again, the same information, but it will plot every candidate on one scale. So you can easily compare them as opposed to flipping through all of their comprehensive selection reports. You will have a report for each, and you will be able to access all of the interview questions for each, but this at least provides a snapshot for you of the thinking styles, the behavior, and the interests. So we'll take a look at a sample of each of these pages. There's the thinking style. You can see that Oliver is the only one that meets the standard for numerical ability. So, you might want to really focus your questioning of all candidates in that area. Here's the behavioral traits section, and you can see that almost all of them are more forceful than the performance model calls for. So again, might be another area for you to explore. And then of interest, just one candidate holds the number one interest of being enterprising. They all have some interest in here. And perhaps you're interviewing for multiple positions at the same time, and ask yourself if you're considering that there may be candidates who see or respond to a job posting for one position and not another. Maybe sometimes people pigeonhole themselves based on where they've spent the most time or acquired the most experience. We all seem to get a fairly narrow view over time of what positions we can hold. So if you look at the position ranking here, actually for Oliver, he fits the specialist position that might be available in your company either today, or if not today, perhaps if Oliver is not hired, he's someone that you consider for an opening down the road. But you can see them in order. Next is manager sales, and then his sample position that we're talking about today. And what it will do is it will give you, again, an overall page of each position. That's in this particular report. You can also run reports for Oliver for your one fee against all those other positions and get a complete comprehensive selection report for each of these. So now we've talked about all the great things, but there are some cautions to hiring assessments. You don't want to expect any test or procedure to measure a personal trait or ability with perfect accuracy. And again, this comes right from the U.S. Department of Labor's testing and assessment document. There are going to be cases in which a test score procedure will predict someone to be a good worker who in fact is not. There will also be cases in which an individual receiving a low score will be rejected, and that person could actually be a very capable and good worker. And such errors in assessment are called selection errors. They can't be completely avoided in any assessment. However, assessments continue to be used because they do enable organizations to make more effective decisions than just using simple observations or random decision making. You do need to develop a written policy on your hiring process. I'm telling you something that you already know, along with conducting how are you going to conduct the testing and assessment process. And it should include individuals with disabilities so that you are ensuring your organization's compliance with the provisions of ADA. And you may want to look up, if you haven't in the past, the uniform guidelines on the Department of Labor's website. And it'll go through all the regulations that are required for you, the records that you need to maintain on employment-related activities, including statistics related to testing and adverse impact. And again, just keep in mind, any assessment should not contribute more than a third toward your decision, and you'll be certainly taking into consideration other factors, the interview, the past experience, the references. Steps to implementation: first developing your job description, then once completed, choosing the performance model, and we help you do that best fits the job description. Identifying your pool of candidates from your resume reviews and screening interviews. Many times I am told these are done by phone. And then finally, assessing your top candidates before more interview time is scheduled. Use your assessments to conduct efficient, consistent interviews across multiple stakeholders. So in summary, what we covered is the PXT performance model, the comprehensive selection report that includes the interview questions, the most valuable piece, the multiple candidates report, and the multiple positions report. Next month, we're going to have a follow-up session and provide an overview of the reports that help you onboard and manage a new hire, in addition to helping them integrate into an existing team. As well, there is a report that helps you coach their job skills and behavior, develop their talents, and also because anyone who takes the assessment can be run against any of the 135 positions, you can also use the reports to help you with this person's career planning. So if you'd like to get started, we can help you develop a plan to implement the PXT Select. We do conduct online workshops to introduce the program to specific teams, staff trainings and certifications. Certification certainly is not required, but staff training is available. The hiring assessment, including all of the reports for one candidate or one employee, is $295. And that does include, we do set you up with your own administrative account, and we do a 3-hour virtual staff training so that your team understands how to best use the assessments. So thank you very much for joining me. You can thank me by filling out our survey. I would appreciate your candid feedback. I'm interested myself in growing and developing and bringing the most value I can to you and the HR profession. If you would like additional links to any of the documents I referenced, just send me an email. I'm happy to provide them to you. In addition, you will be receiving a link to the recording of the presentation and some additional materials. Next month, again, we're going to continue Oliver's story, what happens after he gets hired. We're going to be conducting part 2, and that will be at the end of July on Thursday, July 27th at the same time, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thanks again.